I never imagined the day would come when I would distrust my wife. For 8 years, Lauren and I had built a life in the heart of the city, two professionals with busy careers, sharing late-night takeout and early morning coffee runs. I'm a software engineer by trade, someone who lives by logic and routine. She works in marketing at a tech firm downtown. We've always trusted each other's odd hours and spur-of-the-moment meetings, or at least I used to. It started as a prickle of doubt one Tuesday evening. Lauren came home well past 11 p.m., blaming a client event that ran late. She offered a quick kiss on my cheek, but I noticed something subtle, a whiff of unfamiliar cologne clinging to her blouse. It wasn't her perfume or mine. When I casually asked how the event went, she hesitated before answering, just a half-second too long. "Fine," she said brightly, too brightly, just the usual schmoozing. Then she disappeared into the shower without another word. Sitting alone at the kitchen table, I tried to dismiss the uneasy feeling gnawing at me. In my line of work, debugging software, I'm trained to spot anomalies and patterns. That night, anomalies in my marriage hovered at the edge of my awareness. The late nights had become more frequent in recent weeks. There were the 2 or 3 times she'd rushed to the balcony to take phone calls in private, and the new password lock on her phone, when previously we'd known each other's passcodes without a thought. None of these on their own were damning, but together they painted a worrisome picture. I remember fiddling with my wedding band, a nervous habit I didn't even know I had until that moment. Am I being paranoid? I wondered. Lauren had given me no explicit reason to suspect her. She'd never been anything but devoted as far as I knew. We'd had our minor arguments, whose turn it was to do laundry or her forgetting to mention a happy hour plan, but nothing out of the ordinary. We didn't have kids, and our lives were largely focused on work and each other. In theory, that left little room for secrets, but something was different lately. Even the way she looked at me had changed. Less eye contact, more distracted nodding when I talked about my day. And there was a new intensity in her grooming habits. Last Saturday, she spent over an hour getting ready just to grab coffee with a friend. She left in a dress she usually saved for special occasions. I joked that she looked ready for a date, and she laughed it off. Yet now that laugh rings in my memory as forced. I tried to rationalize. Marketing often meant entertaining clients, and her firm had been pushing for new accounts. The phone calls could have been her boss, and maybe she set a password on her phone after a coworker had their privacy violated in some office drama. All plausible. I nearly convinced myself I was overthinking it. Nearly. That night, lying in bed next to a softly snoring Lauren, I stared at the ceiling. In the faint city glow seeping through our curtains, I could make out her silhouette turned away from me. I wanted to wrap my arms around her like I usually did, but a cold weight in my stomach kept me still. If my suspicions were baseless, I'd be relieved. If they weren't, well, better to know the truth than live in blissful ignorance. I told myself I was just being cautious, protecting our marriage by dispelling doubts. Yet deep down, I sensed that once I peeked behind this curtain, I might not like what I found. The next morning, I decided to pay closer attention. Wednesday passed uneventfully, except for my own heightened awareness of her every move. She left for work at 8 a.m. with a peck on my lips and a distracted, "See you tonight." At lunch, I texted to ask about her day. Normally, she'd respond with a funny GIF or a quick call, but this time I got only a short, "busy day, talk later." That was unlike her. That evening, I cooked spaghetti bolognese, one of her favorites. When she arrived home at 7 p.m., early for a change, I greeted her cheerfully and watched her face to see if guilt lurked there. She seemed surprised by the dinner spread. "What's the occasion?" she asked, hanging up her coat. Under the foyer light, I noticed she had done her hair with a subtle wave it didn't naturally have. Another detail filed away in my mind. "No occasion. Just missed you," I replied, which was half true. I did miss us, the easy closeness we used to have. We sat and ate, chatting about ordinary things. She told me a humorous story about a colleague's mishap in a meeting. I laughed at the right moments, but part of me was dissecting her every word and gesture. Was her smile reaching her eyes? Did she seem uncomfortable or distant? Over dinner, I casually mentioned, "Oh, I ran into Mark from your office near my building today. I forgot he transferred to HQ here. Have you seen him around?" Lauren's fork paused mid-twirl of pasta. A flash of something, panic, crossed her face, then was gone. "Mark? Yeah, he's here now. But I haven't really talked to him much," she said lightly, and quickly changed the subject to whether we should repaint the living room. I found that odd. She and Mark used to be good work friends. Why wouldn't she talk to him? When we climbed into bed that night, Lauren rolled onto her side facing away, as had become her habit. I lay there, heart heavy, mind racing. The evidence was circumstantial, but enough that I could not dismiss it. Erratic hours, secretive behavior, unexplained details. It all pointed to one possibility, as much as I hated to think it. My wife might be having an affair. I felt a mix of dread and anger bubble up. My rational mind wanted more proof before making any accusation. I wouldn't blow up my marriage over suspicions alone. But another part of me, the hurt and fearful part, was already bracing for betrayal. I needed to know. One way or another, I had to find out what was truly going on in the shadows of our life. I didn't have to wait long for more concrete proof. The very next day, a small opportunity cracked the mystery wide open. Thursday at work, unable to focus on code, I logged into our cell phone provider's online account during lunch. Since we shared a family plan, I could see the call and text logs for both our phones. Scrolling through pages of records, I felt my pulse quicken. There it was, an unfamiliar number appearing over and over, dozens of times a day. Most were text messages, time-stamped early mornings, late nights, even during those client events she attended. The number was not one I recognized from our circle of friends. My heart pounded as I copied the number and did a quick reverse lookup. No name came up in public directories, but a hunch told me to try something else. I remembered the uneasy look on her face when I mentioned Mark from her office. Who did Mark work under? He transferred here to join a new director, if I recalled. Someone named Brian. Yes, Lauren had mentioned a Brian months ago when he was hired as the marketing director. I searched Lauren's company website and found the staff page. Brian Carter, Director of Marketing. His corporate bio stared back at me, a professional headshot of a man in his mid-40s with a confident smile. Married, 2 kids, Ivy League graduate. Facts I gleaned from a quick LinkedIn search. A surge of anger twisted in my gut. If my suspicion was right, this was the man encroaching on my life. I compared the area code of the mystery number to the company's office number. Same area code. It could be a coincidence, but my instincts screamed that Brian was the owner of that number. My hands trembled above the keyboard. Seeing the sheer volume of messages confirmed that something was very, very wrong, but I needed to know exactly what those texts said. The logs only showed frequency, not content. For all I knew, those could be work-related, though who texts about work at midnight on a Saturday? That evening, I returned home determined to get a look at Lauren's phone. I felt sick with anticipation, but also fueled by a grim resolve. The logical part of me had already shifted into problem-solving mode. I had an objective, find evidence, and now I needed a method. Fortune favored me in a twisted way. After dinner, Lauren curled up on the couch to watch a reality TV show she loved, one of those guilty pleasures. I joined her, pretending to scroll through my laptop, all the while eyeing her phone, which lay on the coffee table. She seemed relaxed, even cheerful, laughing at the TV drama as if nothing weighed on her conscience. Watching her, I felt a flash of pure rage. How could she act so normal, so happy, while betraying me? I forced myself to stay calm. Anger later, I told myself. Evidence now. About halfway through the show, Lauren's phone buzzed with a notification. Her eyes flickered toward it, then back to the TV. I casually reached over. "Who's texting you so late?" I asked with a slight chuckle, as if teasing. She reacted instantly, snatching the phone off the table. "Oh, it's nobody. Just a spam message," she said, too quickly. She held the phone a bit too tightly, screen angled away from me. Red flags flew high. My stomach churned. She never used to care if I glanced at her notifications. I shrugged, acting indifferent. "These spammers are getting out of hand," I said, turning my attention back to my laptop. Inside, I was boiling. Liar. That was no spam. Real spam texts usually show up on the filtered list, not buzz with familiarity. That had to be him, Brian. The remainder of the show, I barely registered a thing. I was busy formulating a plan. Lauren had a habit of taking long showers before bed. It relaxed her, she said. If tonight was one of those nights, I might have a window to inspect her phone. Sure enough, around 10 p.m. she stretched and announced she was going to shower. I mumbled an "all right, love," as if everything was normal, and kept my eyes on my screen as she headed to the bathroom with her robe. The moment I heard the water running, I sprang into action. Her phone was on the nightstand by our bed, plugged in to charge. Heart thudding, I picked it up. The device was locked, demanding the 6-digit PIN she had recently set. I cursed under my breath. In the quiet, steamy haze of the bathroom light under the door, I could hear her faintly humming, meaning I had limited time. I tried the first code that came to mind. Her birthday. Incorrect. Next, our anniversary. Incorrect. Of course she'd avoid those now. I remembered something. A few nights ago, I'd glimpsed her unlocking her phone on the couch when she thought I wasn't watching. The motion of her fingers, a pattern. I closed my eyes, trying to recall the sequence my subconscious had logged. Taking a deep breath, I typed in the numbers I hoped were right, shielding the screen from view in case Face ID tried to scan me. 611205. I pressed enter. The phone unlocked. A tidal wave of adrenaline nearly made me drop it. I was in. With shaking fingers, I navigated to her messages. Immediately, her most recent chat popped up, labeled with a single emoji instead of a name, a red heart. My chest constricted. Inside that thread, the latest text read, "Can't wait till tomorrow night. I'll make sure our favorite room is ready." And it was signed with a B. It felt like the floor opened beneath me. I scrolled up, eyes devouring lines of conversation that made my blood run cold. There were dozens of texts exchanged just today. Lauren. Lunch was amazing. I needed that. You're insatiable. Brian. Only for you. Counting down the minutes until I can feel you again. I thought I might vomit right there. My hands were ice cold, but I kept scrolling, propelled by morbid fascination and heartbreak. The log went back weeks, months even. They spoke of love, of secret meetings, Of mundane things, too. Her complaining about a tough client pitch and him encouraging her, calling her darling. It was as if she had an entirely separate life I knew nothing about. One message from last week stole the breath from my lungs. He has no clue. I actually felt a bit guilty lying to him last night, but it's getting easier. She was talking about me, confiding in her lover about lying to my face. Another from him. Don't worry. Soon we'll have it all. We just have to keep it quiet a bit longer. What did he mean by have it all? Were they making plans beyond just an affair? The implication made my vision blur with fury. My fingers found the built-in camera app and swiftly took screenshots of the most incriminating exchanges. I photographed the thread showing they'd met at the Hotel Astra on at least 3 occasions. Dates and winking references to our spot made it obvious. I photographed the messages where she wrote "love you" to him, a phrase she hadn't spoken to me in weeks. I even snapped a shot of the contact info tied to that heart emoji. It was indeed Brian's number. Proof. I had all the proof I needed. Yet rather than satisfy me, it ignited a firestorm of emotions. Betrayal, rage, humiliation, they all crashed into me at once. My pulse whooshed in my ears as I locked her phone and carefully set it back on the nightstand, exactly as it was. Then I retreated to the living room under the pretense of grabbing a glass of water, because I needed a moment to compose myself before facing her again. In the kitchen, I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady my breathing. My reflection in the dark window above the sink was a stranger's, wide eyes, clenched jaw, face pale with shock. I wanted to scream, punch a hole in the drywall, anything to release the torrent of pain inside. How could she do this to us? To me? The woman I adored was sharing our intimacy with another man, mocking me behind my back. Every "I love you" she'd ever uttered now felt tainted by her deceit. The water in the bathroom had stopped. I heard the faint click of the bathroom door opening. Quickly, I filled a glass and gulped down water I didn't even taste. By the time she emerged, toweling her hair, I was back in the bedroom, sitting on the bed, pretending to look at my phone. I had to force myself to meet her eyes and smile. She looked radiant, skin flushed from the hot shower, an irony that made me sick. She was glowing while I was dying inside. "You okay?" she asked, noticing something in my expression despite my effort to mask it. Was I that transparent? I scrambled to respond. "Yeah," I managed, then coughed to clear the tightness in my throat. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just got an email from work. Bug in the code, might have to patch it tomorrow." The lies slipped out smoothly, the taste bitter but necessary. She nodded sympathetically. "Sorry. Try not to work too late on it," she said, and leaned in to give me a peck on the cheek. I had to stop myself from recoiling. Her damp hair brushed my face, and ordinarily the scent of her shampoo would be inviting. Tonight, it just reminded me of the steam that must have fogged up the hotel room mirrors during her trysts with him. As she turned off the bedside lamp and crawled under the covers, I stayed upright for a moment, staring into the darkness. My mind was a battlefield of impulses. Part of me wanted to flip on the lights, shove the evidence in her face and demand answers, or at least watch her squirm. I envisioned myself yelling, asking her why, how could you, maybe even throwing that damned phone across the room. But another part of me, colder, calmer, held back. If I confronted her now in a blaze of anger, what would I accomplish? She'd deny or cry or spin some story. It would be an emotional eruption with no strategy, no lasting consequences for anyone but me. She might run straight to Brian, warn him, and they'd close ranks. I couldn't let that happen. No, I wouldn't confront her. Not yet. If my marriage was over the moment she gave herself to another man, then so be it. But I was not going to walk away as the pathetic, duped husband everyone whispered about. I would not give them the satisfaction of sneaking off into the sunset while I licked my wounds. They thought I was clueless, an obstacle to work around. They were wrong. Sliding under the covers beside my wife, my faithless wife, I felt a strange, icy clarity settle over me. I would play along for now, act none the wiser, all the while planning my next move. Lauren had made her choices. Now I would make mine. In the silent dark, I whispered so quietly that even I could barely hear it. A vow only for me. You have no idea what's coming. My heart was still broken, but its shattered pieces were hardening into something cold and sharp. If she wanted a way out of our marriage, I would give it to her. On my terms, and with a price she'd never forget. True to my word, I began planning in earnest the very next day. If last night was about emotional devastation, today was about cold strategy. In the morning I rose early, well before Lauren, and transferred the screenshots from my phone to a secure folder on my laptop, encrypted and backed up to a private cloud drive only I could access. I also quietly dug out an old USB drive and copied the evidence there as an extra precaution. I wasn't going to risk her somehow deleting or discovering what I had. When Lauren finally woke, I was in the kitchen cooking eggs, acting as though it was just another Friday. My heart clenched when she walked in and gave me a sunny smile. "Smells good," she said, sliding her arms around me from behind. I stiffened for a fraction of a second before forcing myself to relax into her embrace. She felt like a stranger now, even as she rested her cheek between my shoulder blades. I murmured a neutral response and served breakfast. Over our meal, she was chatty, talking about weekend plans, suggesting we go see a new movie. She looked me in the eyes, smiling, as she lied through her teeth, because I knew her other plan for tonight, a rendezvous at the Astra Hotel with Brian. The text I'd read promised our favorite room this very evening. The audacity of her sitting here planning a movie date with me while intending to be in another man's arms in mere hours made my blood boil. Still, I mirrored her smile and agreed that a movie sounded great. "Let's do the late show tomorrow. Gives us all Saturday free before that," I suggested casually. No way was I going to a theater with her tonight. I had other intentions for this Friday. She seemed satisfied, perhaps relieved that I was so unsuspecting. As she left for work, she gave me a kiss as usual. I kissed her back, tasting deceit. "Have a good day," she said sweetly. "Oh, I will," I replied, and had to bite back the bitterness rising in my throat. Once she was out the door, I allowed my mask to drop. My hands were trembling. Anger, adrenaline, I wasn't sure. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Focus, Ethan. I had to be smart about this. I had one chance to orchestrate the downfall of my cheating wife and her lover, and I intended to be methodical and thorough. At work, I barely managed to pretend to code while really devoting myself to research. Thankfully, as a senior engineer, I had flexibility and a private office. I closed the door, opened a browser, and immersed myself in reading everything I could find about divorce and infidelity. If I was going to war, I needed to know the battlefield. I learned that while our state allowed no-fault divorce, adultery could still be cited as a fault-based ground with potential impact on the outcome. Courts typically demanded solid proof of the affair, not just suspicion, for it to count. Luckily, I already had a trove of compelling evidence. Explicit text messages and emails are often accepted as proof of an extramarital relationship, especially when they clearly show romantic or sexual content, which mine certainly did. I also discovered that if a cheating spouse spent marital funds on their affair, a judge might factor that into dividing assets. For instance, money blown on hotel rooms, dinners, or gifts for the affair partner could be considered financial misconduct and lead to a larger share of assets for the wronged spouse. That tidbit made me smirk grimly. I resolved to comb through our financials for any hint of such spending. Another crucial point I noted. In some cases, an adulterous spouse can even be denied alimony due to their misconduct. Now, Lauren earns a decent salary, but mine is higher, and if we divorced under normal circumstances, I might have been on the hook for spousal support. Not if I could help it. A fault-based filing citing adultery could torpedo any claim she had to my income, especially if I proved her affair was the cause of the marriage breakdown. I also stumbled on warnings about obtaining evidence legally. It turns out hacking into a spouse's private accounts or planting illegal surveillance could backfire in court. Fortunately, I hadn't needed to break any laws. Guessing her phone PIN wasn't a crime. And as a subscriber on our phone plan, I had every right to review the call logs. Still, I made a mental note to stick to above-board methods going forward. The last thing I wanted was to give her an opening to turn the tables on me due to a technicality. My research extended beyond the divorce itself. I began considering how to make Lauren and her lover face professional and social consequences too. Since Brian was not just some random fling but her boss, their affair was a ticking time bomb in the workplace. I recalled hearing about cases where a manager involved with a subordinate led to sexual harassment complaints or claims of favoritism, resulting in firings and even lawsuits. If their higher-ups got wind of this, Brian could lose his job, and Lauren's position would be highly jeopardized as well. At minimum, it would be a scandal in her office. At worst, grounds for termination under company policy. I suspected their company had standard HR rules against superior-subordinate relationships, especially clandestine ones that could harm morale. The two lovebirds probably thought they could keep it secret, but secrets have a way of outing themselves, especially with a little push. I was more than willing to provide that push. By midday, I felt I had the outline of a plan, and I wrote it down in my notebook, the one I usually filled with project ideas and lines of code. This was a different kind of project. Gather irrefutable evidence. I already had their incriminating texts, and I knew where and when they planned to meet next. I decided to secure photographic proof of their affair. A private investigator could help tail them tonight at the Astra Hotel and snap pictures of their rendezvous. Alternatively, I considered doing it myself. Part of me craved to witness their betrayal with my own eyes, as painful as that might be. But confronting them physically carried risks. Better to let a professional handle the surveillance for now. Consult a divorce attorney. Armed with evidence, I would find the best divorce lawyer I could afford, one known for ruthless tactics. I wanted someone who wouldn't shy away from using the affair to negotiate a brutal settlement in my favor. I'd keep this meeting secret from Lauren until the moment was right. Protect and prepare financially. Before tipping her off in any way, I needed to secure our assets. That meant separating my direct deposit from our joint account into a personal account she couldn't touch, checking our savings and investment accounts, and perhaps freezing or monitoring them so she couldn't quietly siphon money once she realized the jig was up. I also planned to gather records of any suspicious expenses on her part. If she had used our joint credit card or bank account for her affair, like paying for hotels or gifts, I would find those charges and document them as evidence of financial betrayal. Set a legal trap. This idea simmered in the back of my mind. If we ended up in divorce court, I wanted to maneuver her into a corner. Perhaps I could have my lawyer formally ask about infidelity in a deposition or paperwork, giving her the chance to lie under oath. Knowing Lauren's pride, she might perjure herself to save face. With the evidence I had, that lie would crumble and destroy her credibility in the case. It was a risky play, but devastating if it worked. On the other hand, a more straightforward trap was simply waiting to serve divorce papers at a moment that maximized her discomfort and minimized her ability to react, ideally when she was reeling from other fallout. Professional and reputational sabotage. I intended to anonymously expose the affair to her company's HR department or higher management. A carefully crafted message with a few key pieces of evidence, for instance, dates and times they slipped away together, maybe even a photo if I got one, would launch an internal investigation. Brian would likely be fired for breaching ethics, and Lauren could face consequences too. Even if she wasn't fired, the stain on her reputation would stick. The office gossips would have a field day once HR started asking questions. It would burn down the pedestal they'd built for their romance and likely turn their workplace into hostile territory. Social exposure. I wasn't going to keep their dirty secret for them. I planned to discreetly let our close friends and family know exactly why our marriage was ending. I would do it in a way that garnered me sympathy and left her no room to spin the narrative. If I played it right, she would lose the respect of many peers. The thought was petty, perhaps, but in the flurry of my wounded mind, it felt like justice. She had already made a fool of me. It was only fair I return the favor by unveiling the truth of her character. Looking at my list, I felt a grim satisfaction. This was not the naive, loving husband of yesterday. This was someone else. Someone determined to reclaim his dignity and then some. Lauren and Brian had no idea that I was sharpening knives behind my calm facade. Around 2 p.m., I stepped out of the office and made a call to a private investigator I found online, a former police detective named Sam who specialized in domestic cases. He picked up on the second ring. Lowering my voice, I explained the situation in brief. My wife was meeting her lover, her boss, tonight at the Astra Hotel at 8 p.m., and I wanted photographic evidence of them together. Sam didn't even bat an eye. He'd clearly heard it all before. For a retainer fee and an hourly rate, he assured me he could get what I needed. We arranged that I'd send him a recent photo of Lauren and any details I had on the lover, description, car make, etc. I emailed him Lauren's LinkedIn headshot and noted that Brian drove a black BMW. I had seen him pick her up once for a work lunch months ago, an image I now recalled with bitterness. Hiring the PI gave me an unexpected sense of relief. It was as if I wasn't alone in this fight. Now I had a professional ally to handle at least one aspect of the plan. Sam would do the dirty work of tailing them, and I could keep my hands clean for the bigger battles ahead. By the time I wrapped up my workday, I barely wrote a line of actual code, but I'd worry about that later. I had put several pieces in motion. I left the office feeling a cold purpose surging through my veins. There was still the hardest part ahead, enduring whatever charade Lauren would perform tonight, and the coming days until I sprung my trap. But at least I wasn't flying blind anymore. I had knowledge. I had a strategy, and soon I would have even more evidence. Driving home, I rehearsed my demeanor. If Lauren was heading to meet Brian at 8, she'd likely concoct an excuse for me. I was curious what lies she'd tell this time. Sure enough, at about 6:30 p.m., she appeared in the bedroom freshly changed into a chic outfit. Dark jeans, a silky burgundy blouse, heels. She had applied more makeup than usual for a Friday night in. My heart clenched despite everything. She looked beautiful, and once I would have been thrilled to have such a gorgeous woman to call my wife. Now it just felt like watching a stranger put on someone else's face. "You're going out?" I asked mildly, playing dumb even as I knew exactly where she was going. She looked a tad caught off guard that I asked. Perhaps my usual self wouldn't have questioned it. But she recovered fast. "Oh yeah," she said, eyes flitting away for a second. "My friend Kayla is in town last minute. She texted earlier to grab dinner and drinks. I didn't mention it because I wasn't sure if I'd go, but you don't mind, right? I figured since we didn't have firm plans." The ease with which she lied made my jaw almost drop, but I kept my mask on. "Kayla from college?" I feigned surprise. "No, I don't mind. We can do the movie tomorrow like we thought. Have fun. You deserve a night out." Lauren's smile dazzled. Whether from relief or excitement, I couldn't tell. Maybe both. "Thank you, Ethan. You're the best," she said, and had the gall to kiss me on the lips. I let her. Then she grabbed her purse. "There's leftovers in the fridge if you get hungry. I'll probably be back late. Don't wait up." "Sure. Tell Kayla I said hi," I replied. Inside, I was already envisioning her meeting Brian, their hands all over each other, laughing at how easily they fooled good old clueless Ethan yet again. Enjoy it while it lasts, I thought darkly. When I heard the front door close behind her, I allowed myself a single guttural noise of disgust, halfway between a growl and a sob. I paced the living room alone for a few minutes, adrenaline making my limbs shake. This was the first time I'd ever looked someone I love in the face and lied right back to them, playing a part so contrary to how I felt. It was harder than I expected. A wave of sadness hit me then. The person I had loved was gone, or maybe had never truly existed in the way I believed. Grieving could come later, I told myself fiercely. For now, I had to remain composed and stick to the plan. I checked my watch. Almost 7 p.m. Sam, the investigator, would be in position soon at the hotel. I had decided not to hover nearby. I trusted him to do his job, and I didn't entirely trust myself not to lose control if I were physically there. Instead, I sat down at my computer and busied myself by logging into our joint bank accounts. If I was going full scorched earth, I needed to start making moves here, too. Over the next hour, I quietly rerouted my upcoming paycheck to a new individual account I opened online. I also set up electronic copies of our recent bank statements and credit card bills. Skimming through them, I struck gold. 2 charges from the Astra Hotel's lounge appearing in the last month, both on evenings Lauren had claimed to have work events. There was also a rather pricey jewelry store purchase on our joint credit card a while back, which I hadn't paid much attention to. Around $400 for a necklace in June. I never received any such gift. It could have been something she bought for herself, but given the timing, I suspected it might have ended up in someone else's hands, or around someone else's neck. I noted these expenses. They might bolster my case that she misused marital assets on her affair. A little after 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was an email from Sam with a single line. "Got them. We'll send a link to photos within the hour." Even though I'd expected it, my heart raced. I replied with a quick thank you and closed my eyes, exhaling a long breath. A rush of conflicting feelings washed over me. Triumphant satisfaction that I'd been vindicated in my suspicions and was amassing the ammunition needed to destroy them, and deep anguish at the confirmation, now visual, that the woman I loved was betraying me in the flesh. True to his word, by 10 p.m. I received a secure link. I clicked it and my screen filled with high-resolution images, time-stamped earlier that evening. The first was of Lauren in the hotel parking lot, looking around as if to ensure no one saw her before getting out of her car. The next showed Brian meeting her by the side entrance. Even in a still photo, I could see the grin on his face and how he placed a hand on the small of her back. A subsequent image captured them in the hallway by a room door. She was kissing him, arms around his neck, his hands on her waist. I had to look away for a moment, jaw clenched so hard it hurt. More photos followed, them entering the room together, and later one of them leaving, their disheveled appearance and satisfied looks making it clear what had transpired inside. Every picture was another knife in my heart, but also another nail in the coffin of their lies. I saved all of it to my growing evidence cache. I even backed those up to a second USB drive for good measure. By the time Lauren returned home close to midnight, texting me cheerfully on the way that it was great catching up with Kayla, I was composed again, albeit emotionally exhausted. I pretended to be half asleep on the couch. She waltzed in, smelling of wine and hotel soap, quickly spinning a tale about how Kayla had to send her regards and how they spent the night laughing about old times. I muttered that I was glad she had fun. I didn't trust myself to say more without my voice betraying me. As I trailed her into the bedroom, watching her calmly undress and get ready for bed, I felt something shift irrevocably inside me. Love, hate, sorrow, all fused into a single resolve. She thought she had duped me completely. Little did she know I had already begun to dismantle her fantasy piece by piece. The following week, I initiated the next phase of my plan, engaging a lawyer who could help turn all this evidence into a crushing legal victory. After careful consideration, I booked a consultation with one of the top divorce attorneys in the city, a woman named Marjorie Klein, reputed for her aggressive advocacy. If anyone could help me navigate a divorce that left my wife with nothing, it was her. On Tuesday afternoon, I found myself sitting in Marjorie's sleek office high above downtown. I felt a strange detachment as I presented a calm facade and relayed the key points of my situation. It was as if I were describing someone else's life. My wife is having an affair with her boss. I have evidence, texts, photos, financial records. I want to file for divorce on grounds of adultery and ensure she doesn't profit from her betrayal. As I spoke, I produced a neatly organized binder. I'd compiled it over the weekend, containing printouts of text message logs, selected screenshots, and a summary of the expenses I'd identified, the hotel charges, the jewelry purchase, etc. I'd even included a couple of the PI's photos, discreetly cropped for decency, showing Lauren and Brian entering that hotel room. Marjorie flipped through the materials, her expression professionally neutral. Then she nodded, once, sharply. "This is ample evidence," she said. "Barring any major surprises, we can certainly proceed with a fault divorce due to adultery." "How long has this been going on?" "At least 6 months, probably more," I replied, unable to keep a hint of bitterness out of my voice. She pursed her lips. "Do you have children together?" "No, no kids." Thank God, I thought silently, for the first time grateful that we hadn't gotten around to starting a family. "That simplifies matters," Marjorie said. "We'll be focusing on asset division and possibly alimony. Given what you've shown me, the court may look unfavorably on your wife. Infidelity isn't outright illegal, but judges have discretion. For example, using marital funds for an affair is considered dissipation of assets. You have evidence of that, which can influence the split. And if she were planning to seek spousal support, well..." A thin smile crossed her lips as she tapped a screenshot of Lauren's intimate texts. This would likely quash that. I realized I was holding my breath. So you think I can take her to the cleaners? I asked, almost hesitant at the vengeful phrasing. Marjorie met my eyes coolly. If those are your instructions, mister, your last name, I will do everything in my power to achieve a favorable outcome for you. We can file this week. Typically, I'd advise not to tip her off, but it sounds like you're well past reconciliation. Way past, I confirmed. There would be no reconciliation, and I wanted that abundantly clear. I intend to serve her by surprise. The moment she knows, she'll likely run to her lover for help or try to hide things. I want her blindsided. Understood, Marjorie said, with a glint in her eye that told me she relished this kind of challenge. We spent the next half hour going over details: marital assets, accounts, property. Fortunately, our situation was straightforward. We rented our condo, the lease was up for renewal soon, another thing I'd have to handle post-divorce, and both our cars were individually leased. We had some savings and retirement accounts, but nothing unmanageably complex. It struck me as tragically efficient. 8 years of marriage could be unwound in a few spreadsheets and legal forms. Before I left, Marjorie asked one parting question. How do you want the service to happen? I can have a process server deliver the papers quietly, or if you have a preference. She trailed off, giving me a knowing look. I thought about it for a moment. Images flashed through my mind. Lauren being served at work in front of her colleagues, or at home when she least expected it. I realized I wanted it to sting, but I also didn't want to create unnecessary drama that might complicate the process. Serve her at work, I decided finally, voice steely. She'll be in her office around mid-morning. I want it to be public enough that she can't hide from what's happening, but I'll leave the specifics to your team. Marjorie nodded. Consider it done. Once she's served, we'll have a timeline to respond. If she retains counsel, which she likely will, we'll proceed with discovery. Given the evidence, I suspect they'll advise her to settle quickly. If not, we'll be prepared to litigate. There was a pause, then she added, one more thing. Sometimes the opposing side will deny or downplay the affair initially. We might send an informal request for admission of infidelity. If she's foolish enough to lie in response, it will only strengthen our hand. A thin smile of my own formed. Ask her. I'd love to see her lie and then watch her face when we show the proof. The thought of Lauren trying to maintain innocence in the face of what we had was almost satisfying. It would be another layer of her duplicity peeled away under scrutiny. Walking out of that law office, I felt more empowered than I had in weeks. I had a razor-sharp ally in Marjorie, and the legal machinery was now gearing up to formally set my revenge in motion. That evening, I finalized the other prongs of my attack. I wrote an anonymous email to Lauren's company's HR department. It was concise but detailed enough to prompt action. I explained that I had evidence, photos and dates, of a sexual relationship between director Brian C. and his direct report, Lauren last name, including instances of them using work hours and possibly company resources for their liaisons. I hinted at possible liability for the company due to this misconduct. I attached a couple of discrete photos as proof. I didn't identify myself. I simply signed off as concerned party with knowledge of unethical behavior. I knew such tips were usually investigated swiftly, especially when evidence was provided. HR would likely drop a hammer on both of them. I hovered over the send button for a moment, my finger trembling with anticipation, and then clicked it. Next, I prepared one more disclosure, a package for Brian's wife. Through some social media sleuthing, I had found her name, Jennifer, and their home address in a suburb. It didn't feel great involving an innocent party, but I justified it by reminding myself that she deserved to know what her husband was up to, just as I had deserved to know about Lauren. I printed a few of the most damning photos. No need to include the explicit texts. The images spoke loudly enough. And wrote a short, anonymous note. Your husband, Brian, has been having an affair with a woman named Lauren, last name from his office. I thought you should know the truth. Enclosed are photographs as proof. I sealed it all in a plain envelope. That night, under cover of darkness, I drove out to their quiet suburban street and dropped the envelope into their mailbox. I felt a twinge of sympathy for what Jennifer would feel upon seeing those contents. I knew that pain firsthand. But I also felt a grim sense of parody. If my life was upended, Brian's domestic life wouldn't remain unscathed either. With the lawyer engaged, the HR bomb primed, and the spouse informed, nearly every fuse was lit. The last step was the most personal one, confronting Lauren, and for that, I wanted to control the narrative. I decided I would not tip her off until the divorce papers were literally in her hand. I imagined the moment over and over, her confusion turning to shock and panic. It gave me a cold comfort during the sleepless nights as the day approached. I didn't have to wait long. By Friday morning of that week, everything was in place. Marjorie had filed the divorce petition at the courthouse on Thursday, citing adultery and irreconcilable breakdown of the marriage. The process server was scheduled to visit Lauren's office late Friday morning. Meanwhile, I had learned, via a brief follow-up call from an HR manager to whom I feigned being a concerned coworker, that an investigation was underway at her company. Word travels fast in an office. I could only imagine the rumors already brewing. On Friday at 11 a.m., I sat at my own office desk, hands clasped tightly, unable to do anything but watch the clock and envision what might be happening downtown at Lauren's workplace. I pictured her in a meeting or at her desk when a stranger walks in asking, "Are you Lauren, last name?" and then handing her an envelope with legal documents. Perhaps he'd say something official like, "You've been served." I wondered if her face drained of color, if her hands shook opening it. It gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction and anxiety all at once. This was it, the moment my actions would collide with her world. Sure enough, at 11:30, my phone began to buzz incessantly. I glanced at the screen. Lauren. I let it ring. She called again immediately. Then came text messages. First, a simple, "Call me now." Then, "What the hell is this?" I smirked at the demanding tone. Even now, caught off guard and exposed, she was trying to assert control. I didn't respond. Instead, I quietly wrapped up my tasks at work and told my manager I had a family emergency and needed the rest of the day. It wasn't even a lie. The implosion of one's marriage counted as such in my book. I headed home to wait for her, because I knew she'd be coming. There was no doubt in my mind that as soon as she recovered from the shock, she'd leave work and confront me in person. The drive home was a blur. My heart thumped in anticipation of the showdown. Would she cry, scream, try to beg forgiveness or spew anger? I felt oddly calm, as if all my emotions had been wrung out, and what remained was a steely resolve to see this through. I was done being the victim. This time, she was on the back foot. I arrived at our condo and positioned myself in the living room, evidence folder at the ready on the coffee table like a prepared dossier. I didn't have to wait long. Shortly after noon, I heard the doorknob rattle frantically, and then Lauren burst in. She must have broken every traffic law to get here so fast. Her face was ashen, eyes red, whether from anger or crying or both. She had the served divorce papers clutched in her hand like a weapon. The moment she saw me, she launched into a tirade. "How could you embarrass me like that at work?" she shouted, voice cracking. You had me served in front of my co-workers?" There was fury and, beneath it, a tremor of panic. She was still standing by the doorway, as if unsure how to approach. I stood slowly, feeling a surge of adrenaline. This was the first time we'd acknowledged the truth aloud. There was no point pretending anymore. "I think the better question, Lauren," I said, surprisingly steady, "is how could you do what you did to me? To us?" Her eyes flashed and she looked away for a second, chest heaving. "So what? This is punishment. You humiliate me at my job as payback." She didn't even attempt denial. The time for lies was clearly over, and she knew it. "Punishment? Consequences," I corrected coldly. "You earned every bit of this. Did you think I would just quietly divorce you and let you ride off into the sunset with him? No. You don't get to stab me in the back and walk away unscathed." She blanched, and in a beat her anger deflated into desperation. "Ethan, please, can we just talk about this?" She stepped forward, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I sidestepped, and she grasped only air. Tears pooled in her eyes. "I'm sorry, okay? I never meant for it to go this far." I let out a bitter laugh. "Which part? You never meant to hurt me or you never meant to get caught?" She winced. I was going to end it. I swear. I just... Things have been so strained between us. And Brian..." She stopped herself at uttering his name, as if that would set me off more. My expression must have told her it didn't matter, because I already knew every detail. "Go on. Brian what? Brian makes you feel special? Brian was going to leave his wife for you and you two had big plans." I nearly spat his name, unable to contain the contempt. Lauren's lip trembled. "No, that's not... You have to understand. I never wanted to hurt you." A tear spilled down her cheek. "It just happened. We got close working together and I felt... I don't know. I felt alive in a way I hadn't. But I realize now how wrong it was. If I could take it back, I would." I stared at her, marveling at the mix of rehearsed excuses and regret. "If you could take it back?" "Lauren, you didn't trip and fall into bed with him one time. It was an ongoing, premeditated affair for months. You lied to my face every day. You spent our money on your little rendezvous. You made me the fool." My voice grew quieter with each sentence, each word weighted with pain. She broke into a sob. I know, I'm sorry." She covered her mouth, trying to stifle the crying. "I was selfish and stupid, but we can fix this." "Fix this?" I echoed incredulously, a sharpness cutting into my tone. "There is no fixing it. We're done, Lauren, done." I pointed at the divorce papers she held. "That is the path forward. Not counseling, not second chances. You destroyed everything when you decided to share our marriage with him." She shook her head, as if denying reality. "I'll quit my job. I'll never see him again. Please, Ethan. 8 years together has to count for something. We can find a way back." I hardened my heart against her imploring tone. "The only thing it counts for is that I know exactly who you are now," I said coldly. "And I have no interest in being married to that person." I gestured to the evidence folder on the coffee table. "Do you want to see what I've got? Lest you think I only know a little." Without waiting for permission, I opened the binder and began tossing items onto the table one by one, my fury gaining momentum. "Here, printed copies of your text messages with Brian. I've highlighted the parts where you laughed about my obliviousness or called me boring. She glanced down, eyes widening at the sight of her own words in black and white. I saw shame flush her face. And here, bank statements showing charges at the Astra Hotel when you told me you were at a work dinner. I flung those pages down too. Photos, Lauren. I tossed down glossy color printouts from the PI. The one on top showed her pressed against Brian in the hotel corridor, locked in an embrace. She glanced at it and let out a wail, swiping it away as if it burned. How did you find out? I'm a software engineer, remember? I notice patterns. It wasn't hard once I paid attention. And once I knew, I made damn sure to get proof. I loomed over her as she sat hunched and weeping. You thought I was an oblivious idiot. You were wrong. She looked up at me, mascara running, her face a portrait of misery. I have nothing now, she choked out. You've taken everything. My job is basically gone. HR suspended us both today. Everyone at work knows something is up. Brian's probably going to be fired, and I might be too. And his wife, oh God, his wife called me. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders trembling. You told her, didn't you? She sent a picture of the two of us at the hotel and said we deserve each other in hell. Despite the gravity of the moment, I felt a dark satisfaction hearing that fallout. In a calm, low voice, I answered, I told you. There are consequences. I warned you in that note I left in the papers. No one will ever look at you the same. Did you think that was an empty threat? She sobbed harder, unable to refute it. I watched her for a moment. This woman I once loved reduced to a crying, broken heap. A small, long-buried part of me almost felt pity. But I remembered how my own pleas would have meant nothing to her when she was sneaking around. She hadn't spared me any consideration then. I stepped back, suddenly feeling very tired. The adrenaline was ebbing, leaving exhaustion and sorrow in its wake. Our marriage is over, Lauren, I said quietly. I'm filing for divorce. You'll get the papers and you'll sign them. I have instructed my lawyer to pursue every advantage. Don't expect any favors. You'll be lucky if you walk away with whatever fits in a suitcase. She looked up, eyes red and wide. Why are you so cruel? She whispered. You loved me once. A hard lump formed in my throat. I loved someone who no longer exists. Maybe never did, I replied. And as for cruel, cruel is cheating on your husband and making him think everything is fine while you laugh behind his back. I'm just giving you what you earned. At that, her expression crumpled again. I know I hurt you. I know, she moaned. I was selfish, and I'll regret it forever. If you need to hate me, hate me. I hate myself. She stood unsteadily. But please, Ethan, can we at least try to end this without destroying each other? We don't have to burn it all down. I almost laughed at the irony. Burn it all down was exactly what I intended. That's rich coming from you. There's not we anymore. There's you, and you're the one who lit the match. I'm just making sure the fire consumes the right people. She wiped her face with a shaking hand, an ember of anger resurfacing. So you'll ruin my life completely. Fine, you've made your point, but don't pretend you're morally superior. This vindictiveness, this is ugly, Ethan. I felt a flare of anger. Ugly? You haven't even seen the half of it. But you will. I strode to the door and opened it wide. Right now, I want you out of this house. Go stay with whoever will have you. Maybe your lover, though I suspect he has his own mess. Or a hotel. Oh, wait, you're good at those. She flinched. This is my home too, she began weakly. Not anymore. I pay the rent. Pack a bag and get out. You can come for the rest of your things later, supervised if necessary. For a long moment, she just stared at me, disbelief and despair mingling on her tear-streaked face. Then, without another word, she moved toward the bedroom. I stood in the hall as she hastily threw clothes and essentials into a duffel. Her movements were clumsy, numb. Neither of us spoke. What else was there to say? In less than an hour, our entire life together had been gutted. When she emerged, bag in hand, she paused in front of me. "I'm sorry," she whispered once more. "I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to." I felt an unwanted sting in my own eyes. I steeled myself. "Goodbye, Lauren." Her shoulders shook as she walked out the door. I shut it firmly behind her and turned the deadbolt. Then I sank back against the door, a tremor running through my body. It was done. 8 years together ended not with a cordial agreement or even an explosive fight, but with a cold, thorough annihilation. In the silence of the apartment, I noticed her wedding ring on the coffee table. She must have removed it at some point during her frenzy. I picked it up and turned it in my fingers. The metal glinted dully. This symbol of our vows meant nothing now. I considered throwing it out or selling it, but ultimately I just placed it aside. It wasn't my burden to carry. I had won. The thought floated to the surface of my consciousness. She was gone, devastated. Her lover was exposed and facing ruin. I had orchestrated every downfall I envisioned. So why did I feel an emptiness settling in my chest? I pushed that thought away and stood tall. This was the price of betrayal, and I intended to collect every last bit of what I was owed. In the weeks that followed, the pieces fell exactly as I had orchestrated. Lauren did not return to our condo except under supervision to collect her remaining belongings. I made sure a security guard friend was present, both for her safety and to prevent any hysterics or property damage. She moved in temporarily with a mutual friend of hers, one who, notably, cut off contact with me after hearing a very skewed version of events from Lauren. It didn't matter. I knew the truth would circulate soon enough. The HR investigation at her company concluded swiftly. Brian was terminated within days for gross misconduct and violation of company policy. His decades-long career at the firm came to an ignoble end. As for Lauren, she technically resigned before they could fire her. It didn't help much. Word of their affair spread quickly, and overnight both became pariahs in their industry, their professional reputations in tatters. On the personal front, the fallout was equally severe. Brian's wife Jennifer did indeed file for divorce almost immediately upon confirming his infidelity. Through the grapevine, I learned she was seeking primary custody of their 2 young kids and a hefty share of assets, and Brian was in a poor position to argue, given the evidence of his affair, some of which, courtesy of me, she had in hand. I don't know if she ever responded to my anonymous letter, but in a way her actions were response enough. I heard that Brian moved into a small rental after being kicked out of his home, and that he and Jennifer weren't on speaking terms except through lawyers. As for Lauren, she stayed initially with that friend, but that arrangement didn't last. Once that friend learned the fuller truth, I made sure to set the record straight by sharing a few choice screenshots with someone in our circle who I knew would disseminate them. Even that support dried up. Lauren ended up relocating to her sister's house in another state, ostensibly to start fresh. I suspect it was as much to escape the shame that clung to her here as it was to lean on family. Her parents, who had treated me like a son, were mortified by her behavior. Her mother called me privately to apologize on Lauren's behalf, crying and saying she didn't know what had gotten into her daughter. I genuinely felt sorry for her mom. None of this was her fault, and she was grappling with equal measures of anger at Lauren and sympathy for me. The divorce process itself was surprisingly swift. Marjorie, true to her word, pressed every advantage. Faced with the mountain of evidence and a clearly furious spouse on my side, Lauren's attorney, whom she hired with borrowed money, I later found out, advised her to acquiesce rather than battle. She waived any claim to alimony, recognizing that a court was unlikely to grant support to an adulterous spouse who was employable. The division of assets went heavily in my favor. I kept the bulk of our savings and retirement funds. In the end, Lauren left the marriage with only a small bank account and her personal effects. There was a brief moment during mediation where she glanced at me, eyes full of hurt, perhaps expecting me to show some mercy or nostalgia for what we once had. I met her gaze with stony indifference. I owed her nothing. One satisfying footnote. During the legal proceedings, there was an occasion when Lauren, perhaps out of lingering pride, claimed the affair wasn't as bad as it looked, and that I was exaggerating her use of marital funds. In response, Marjorie coolly slid the evidence of the hotel bills and gifts across the table, along with printed copies of explicit messages detailing meetings. Caught in her lie, Lauren went scarlet and fell silent. That silence was as good as any confession in the eyes of the mediator. In that moment, I felt a grim sense of closure. Her attempts to rewrite the narrative had failed. By the time our divorce was finalized, spring had turned to summer. On a warm morning, I walked out of the courthouse with the decree in hand. Legally, I was a free man. There was no triumphant fanfare, just a quiet sense of relief and a heavy weight lifting from my shoulders. I stood on the courthouse steps and allowed myself a long, deep breath. It was over. Sure, I wrestled with some bitterness in the aftermath, but it faded as I rebuilt my life. All I know is that I can look myself in the mirror without shame. I did what was necessary, and I can live with it. What became of Lauren and Brian? From what little I've heard, not much. Their spark didn't survive the inferno I set off. Without secrecy, and with both their lives in shambles, they drifted apart. It turns out an affair built on lies doesn't offer much foundation when reality crashes in. Last I learned, Lauren was working a mediocre job in her sister's town, keeping a low profile. Brian, on the other hand, reportedly struggled to find a similar high-paying role. He eventually had to move to a smaller company in a different city, far from the prestige he once enjoyed. They got what they deserved, each other's absence and the fallout of their choices. As I settled into my new apartment, I came across an old photo of Lauren and me from happier times. I calmly set it alight over the kitchen sink, watching her image burn to ash before washing it down the drain. It didn't hurt at all. In fact, it felt like a final release from what was. The past was behind me, reduced to embers. That night, the cool summer breeze drifted through my window as I lay in bed. For the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. Justice had been served, a painful chapter had ended, and a new one was beginning, one I would meet with clear eyes and hard-won freedom.